Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. As you can probably tell, I'm still ill today. That gives me something of a raspy voice, and I hope that my brain fog that I have from the flaring up of my MS doesn't get in the way of presenting some clear facts or ideas about what's going on. What's happened overnight? Well, it's been quite quiet insofar as we've been expecting these huge saturation attacks of missiles and rockets from Russia. Hasn't happened yet, but there are reports from certain sort of towns, and even Kiev as a city is still struggling with electricity and water supply. Certain towns have declared emergencies. Things are not looking good on the infrastructure front. And I imagine they'll just start getting it back together when the Russians hit them again. Be interesting to see how that will pan out. What are the Ukrainian stats for Russian losses? 500 liquidated personnel, 3 tanks, 6 APCs, 1 artillery system, 1 anti-aircraft system, 7 drones. And I've seen some drones footage of, um, all lands and other drones be taken down. So that kind of correlates with that. 6 vehicles and fuel tanks. So sort of uptick in certain areas of the figures there. Uh, Russia has been hit itself quite a bit. So last night, rockets 11 landed in Kursk, in Russia, in the Sudzhansky district. Regional leaders are blaming Ukraine. There are 3 places on fire that look pretty significant. This is a thermal power station in Perm, which is sort of right out in the sticks of Russia, or certainly out east of Moscow, and that's looking pretty serious at the moment. Um, and as well as that, there is videos of a fuel depot located in the settlement of Lesnoy in Bryansk Oblast in Russia early this morning. And apparently, I think it was this one that claims that it was dropped by a drone. So that's interesting that Ukraine are looking to hit into Russian territory. Um, Apparently, Sumy area has been hit sort of 80 times, 80 sort of artillery attacks. So that's receiving quite a bit of attention from the Russians. As we go on, the Ukraine's defense confirms hits on 3 Russian bases in the occupied part of Zaporizhia. They claim the strikes on Tokmak, Polohi, and Basan accounted for 50 units of equipment and ammo depot, and at least 500 Russian soldiers likely to be injured, some killed. This is indicative of what's going on at the moment, which is quite a lot of places are being hit. And as we'll see in a second, this very much includes logistic centers. So the railway lines down into the west here towards Kherson, towards Melitopol are being hit. So we've had the railway being hit there. We've had it being hit up here. We've had it being hit in Ilovaisk and other places around the Zaporizhia Oblast, as you just heard, as well as now we just heard today that they've hit Starobilsk overnight railway there. So this is a concerted effort to try and take out logistics. This is compounded by the fact that it appears that the Kerch Bridge is still not up to scratch. Of course, the intelligence services of the West are saying actually it's not going to be ready till March, September next year. Russians said, it'll be operational in some way by December the 20th. According to this post, Russians are transporting equipment by both civilian ferries and military landing ships. This indicates to me that the Kerch Bridge is in worse condition than previously believed. And that means attacking places like this are all the more important. So Zaporizhia, the Ukrainians reported a strike on Russian positions in the area of Polohi, killing up to 80 enemies. I now consider Polohi a key target for the potential AFU offensive in the south. Now, Polohi has been hit a bunch over the last week. It really is quite a target. So just to give you an idea of exactly where that is, you've got Zaporizhia here, Melitopol, Berdyansk, and on the way down to Berdyansk from the north, you've got Polohi. And this is a railway junction, also a road junction. So really important logistical hub there for the Ukrainians to hit. And they have been hitting it. It's every day there's news that something's been hit there. You can see from all these different colors that it is quite a hub. According to local reports, a railway bridge located in the vicinity of Russian-controlled city of Starobilsk in the Luhansk Oblast of Ukraine was targeted by Ukrainian strikes last night. So railways are sometimes fairly easy to fix up. as in they can be fixed quite quickly. Railway lines just replaced with new stuff and holes filled in. Railway bridges, on the other hand, are somewhat different, and much more difficult. So 6 arrivals to 6 missiles. That strikes. That tells me it's going to be some kind of GMLRS HIMARS type affair there. 6 missiles. 2 of them hit the bridge itself. So that's interesting, and Ukrainians are really doing a good job of attacking these hubs. Now, talking about attacking these hubs, here is an interview of someone. I won't play the whole interview, but I might do it in an extra video. But Phillips O'Brien says 2 interesting things on this Ukrainian soldier. First of all, he mentions a maximum range of 84 kilometers as technical. He says technically the range is 84 kilometers. So what that means is actually they're probably using them up to like 100 kilometers, but the CEP, the accuracy of them might decline after as you go above 84, or they're using some kind of, I don't know, adjusted rocket or something. But it's interesting that he chooses those words. And the other thing he says, and he says a bunch of interesting things actually, is that they are getting really good intelligence. So they're hitting fuel tankers right when they get into the station. So he was talking about we had to hit it at this exact point, which is the point that we knew it was going to get in there, which means that they are getting good intelligence of when these things need to be hit and what their targets are. Whether that is partisan intelligence or just really good satellite intelligence, or both, probably both. And he's talking about this particular piece of kit, which is an MLLS of a German variety, the Mars 2, which he says is really accurate, precision strike. He talks about that a lot, and he says that we are oiling it in all the right places, keeping up together, and fingers crossed this has not had any problems so far and is still operating absolutely fine. So this is the understanding that if we look after these things, then they won't cause us problems going forward. Okay, as we just get towards the end of the preamble, the Russians are building their defenses down south, and this includes getting one of the largest Russian building firms, to actually dig these trenches. And as you can see, they are pretty substantial and extensive, and being built properly in this case, down in the north of the Crimean border. So yeah, I showed you a big wide trench the other day, sorry, in one of my videos, that was straight and it was wide. And I just talked about that being a sort of trench, but it's actually more of a tank sort of trap where it is not designed for humans to hide in. It's too tall actually for them, but it's designed that tanks simply cannot get across that. They have to have some kind of utility vehicle that will allow them to bridge across such a wide trench. So thanks for that being pointed out by someone else. And last thing I'm going to say is I showed you this video yesterday, but a comment on this, and I need to check this figure. But a handful of this is the Lancet drone going not hitting the spot. Handful of 1 to 3 kilogram explosive drones can't make up for Russia firing 40,000 fewer artillery rounds daily than in July. So that's a huge difference. The artillery barrages from Russia are just not up to it. And there is talk about how their artillery has been hit. They just have fewer pieces of artillery. It might also be they have fewer pieces of ammunition, which is why they're going to places like Iran and North Korea for their ammunition. Anyway, I thought that's all really important to tell you before we get into the front lines. Okay, let's quickly jump into the northeast. This is the Kupiansk-Svatove Kreminna front line in the Luhansk Oblast. Let's look at it on my map. So apparently the Russians have somehow attacked Pavlivka here. I presume that's with artillery rather than actual ground troops. So that's been happening in Berestove down here. The Ukrainians have been repelled in Ivanivka, which is towards Yahidny. All up and down here, there's going to be huge amounts of fighting, of course. Svatove has been heavily shelled by the Ukrainians, apparently, taking out some targets. I don't know any details other than that. The Russians have just said that Svatove has been really, really heavily hit. Kuzmivka There's some mill bloggers are saying Novoselivska is under Russian hands again, whilst also others are saying that Kuzmivka, the Russians are repelling Ukrainian attacks. So I don't know how the Ukrainians can be attacking Kuzmivka whilst also losing Novoselivska. But anyway, that it's all happening there. I'd put that down as a big sort of grey zone. And as we come down here, Stanomakivka, all of these places are still much of a muchness. Artillery duels going on there. There is talk about breaching the P66 highway again. I don't know why it doesn't remember to put my highways and whatnot on there. Of course, I'm going to want to see the roads. So talk about the Ukrainians breaching the highway, but again, not 100% sure about that. The Russians claim they are repelling the Ukrainians around Chervona-Popivka again. And that towards Liman, there are attacks from the Russians that are repelled by the Ukrainians. So again, could be in this sort of large grey zone. I haven't really changed any of this for a good week or so because nothing seems to be concrete around there, or in fact up and down that whole line. Sorry, actually, just before I go on, I want to give you a couple of supporting sources. So Noel reports, fighting still goes on around Kuzmivka. The airfield is gradually closing in on Svatove, although the progress is very slow. So that's quite an interesting claim. The trenches north of Kreminna has been extended 10 kilometers to the south the last few days, so they're building a lot of defenses. The Russians there was also shelling reported in the area of Pishane, which might indicate forward elements of the Ukrainians are close to the town. So just to let you know where that is, here we've got Ploshchanka, Chervona-Popivka, we've got Kreminna and Rubizhny. Here's Kreminna. Zitlivka is apparently under shelling pressure, and here's Pishani as well. The idea is that if the Ukrainians are shelling these places right on the highway, that they're going to be getting fairly close. Those are sort of shelling before they attack, arguably. So then talking about Belarus, before we get down towards Bakhmut, this forested area. Well, let's see what Rybar or Rubar say about it, and you can see that they have a grey zone going. This is Belarus all the way over towards Liman along the river, and they control, according to them, the forest and land above that. So actually, this would have the Russians claiming that all of this is grey zone, and they control basically all of this area here. And I just don't think that's true at all. So this is them being, I think, a little bit wishful in their thinking. So there you go. And as you can see, they are claiming to now have Spirne. This is something we're going to come to now, in fact. So let's go south. We've got Belarivka, down to Brestove, through Spirne, all a grey zone all the way down there. So we have all sorts of competing claims. Some Russian mill bloggers have claimed that Spirne has fallen and that the Russians have even marched towards Verkhnokamenetsky and on through towards Seversky River there. That's clearly not happened. And in fact, Prigozhin, who's in charge of the Wagner PMC, has denied that it's happened, that there is just heavy fighting still around Spirne. So Russians are claiming that Ukrainians are making heavy losses around there, which is nothing unusual and could well be true as well. So that brings us towards Bakhmut. There are repelled attacks from the Russians around Belarivka, Yakovlivka, Soledar. I don't think there's any changes particularly there. There are claims that the Russians are knocking on the southeastern outskirts of Bakhmut, which is a little bit of a worry. Opitnye, various claims about Opitnye and whether the Russians are controlling more of that. But actually, most of the news is coming out of these settlements just to the south of Bakhmut. So we have Ozaryanivka and Zelenopilya and Avdivka, this settlement that's not marked on the map there. I think the Ukrainians have admitted that they are under the control of the Russians. And last night, the Russians claimed to control now Kupiansk-Svatove. I've not got that. I've not changed a map here, but I think it's likely that they do control that. There is some evidence that a Ukrainian unit here was completely encircled and did break out and escape, which is good news for the Ukrainians not to have lost a unit of men. But it's not looking good there. There are various claims as to the canal. Some mill bloggers are saying that the Russians have done, pretty good advance around here. I don't think that's likely. and that they control the canal. I don't think it's a case that they've gone, all the way out here, or indeed here. I think there probably is fighting towards. So if we come up a little bit towards Klishchivka, which is this settlement here. So there's probably fighting in Klishchivka. And the bigger question, if they have indeed, if the Ukrainians have lost Kupiansk-Svatove, is what the Russians are going to do from there. So actually, there is some thought to say, if you look at where they've taken most of the ground over the last sort of month or two, it appears to be to the south of Bakhmut. So could it be that actually they're finding the weakness here and they might change their attack to take Toretsk? So Toretsk is, a fairly useful place tactically speaking. There are some supply routes that go through there. And I guess, this would be possibly an easier target than Bakhmut itself, and could represent sort of a much larger encirclement. Or do they continue up here? There was talk, some Russian military bloggers say that, they got as far as Cheziv Yar, which is completely never going to be the case. So you need to watch what, certain sources are saying. But again, it's not looking great around here. As I said yesterday, please check out my Bakhmut video. The Russians will find it really difficult to move through these entrenched fields and tree lines, which have extensive trench networks, particularly just behind Klishchivka, and this is on an elevation as well, so they will find that difficult. And just a couple of things I want to show you about Bakhmut. Interesting, I said they don't really have mechanized equipment in Bakhmut. The Wagner mercenaries fight mainly on foot with artillery support. Russia has pulled up T-90M Prov 3 breakthrough tanks to the front in Bakhmut. It's the latest modification of the T-90 main battle tank with improved protection, mobility, and firepower. Recently, Ukraine captured a handful. That's really interesting because how are the Russian army working in tandem with the PMC? There's an interesting integration here to be explained and maybe thought about a little bit. It's not good news of the T-90s being put into action there. I mean, that is their best tank, really. How much use that'll be in Bakhmut, I'm not sure. We will see whether that it makes any difference at all. The kind of conditions you get in Bakhmut is worth listening to this. This is just a Ukrainian soldier under a Russian artillery barrage. So it's, that's really scary, pretty horrible. Here's a video that's provided by Rubar, who are a Russian source. So I watched this and thought, oh, things aren't good in Bakhmut. This is not a good sign that, Ukrainian morale might well be low. Here are people slagging off their commanders. I don't know whether this is in Russian or Ukrainian. He calls his mate Dmitro. I don't know if that's more the Russian sounding name. But when I watched it again, I was like, oh no, okay, let's be a little bit skeptical here because it is of the source. I know the Russian sources aren't always to be trusted. When the way he starts slagging off his commanders at the end, and the fact that the guy he walks past doesn't show his face at all. Just check this out. I'll turn the sound off, but I'll read out the subtitles. So these guys working in the Bakhmut area. Greetings from the wonderful city of Bakhmut. He's where my brothers and I must defend our homeland. So first of all, there's this guy with a yellow armband digging a trench, but you don't see him. In these conditions, I don't know what to call it without swearing, but after about the first week, this is all that is left of our platoon. There are 4 of us plus Dmitro. They don't want to rotate us out or give us reinforcements. They say, no, you're just the second echelon. It's really interesting that this guy doesn't show his face. Purposely, he's looking the other way. Now, that could be because he's slagging off his own commanders, right? So this could be a Ukrainian guy that knows that they're really unhappy, and this video is going to get out, and he's going to get done for that. Or this is a complete propaganda video. He continues, in our understanding, if you go 5 kilometers from the front in the second echelon, I have nothing to say about the conditions. You see how things are here. We haven't had field rations for a month. Here's what other units shared with us. Here's what we scavenged from houses. Really generic food there, no labels to show whether it's like Ukrainian or Russian. So congratulations to all our leadership. Why do you beeps all have to beep ghost us anyway? Just kill yourselves now, because when we come back, you won't be able to. And there it ends. And it strikes me as that is probably propaganda. Now, I initially thought, oh, this isn't good for Ukraine. Doesn't show Ukrainians in good light. But now I think it probably is propaganda. But I don't know. You tell me what you think. Um, but yeah, not great news. Okay, as we come down through to Avdivka, not a lot of news, particularly offensives being repelled again around there. There have been some claims to say that Ukraine might be striking back towards Opitny here, south of Avdivka, which is interesting. But other than that, it's just generally repelled attacks. Russians claiming Ukrainians are losing a lot of troops around here. So let's go to the Institute for the Study of War to see what they say about this area. Claim that Russian sources have claimed that their forces have experienced successes around Avdivka. Russian sources boasted of heavy Ukrainian casualties and minor operational successes around Avdivka and Marinka. One prominent Russian military blogger claimed that Russian forces control more than 2/3 of Marinka and boasted that Russian forces are succeeding in the area for the first time in 8 years. Another Russian military blogger, however, admitted that the pace of Russian advance in the area is slow. Ukrainian officials reported that Ukrainian forces repelled Russian attacks near Pervomaisky, Nevelsky, and Krasnohorivka. Russian forces continue routine strikes along the line of contact in eastern Ukraine. Okay, so just to unpick that, basically it's that the Russians have had their attacks repelled around here, Pervomaisky, Nevelsky, south of there, Krasnohorivka around here. And Marinka, which is a place where the Russians are hammering quite a lot. They're using combined arms. There's artillery and air force are active. Some military bloggers now saying that the Russians control 2/3 of Marinka, and that's the first. That's the best success they've had in this whole area for 8 years. Others are slightly more restrained in what they're saying, but the end result is going to be pretty tough around Marinka. There's no doubt about that. As we come down towards Pavlivka, indeed, there are claims that some Ukrainian forces, so just to let you know where we are now in the larger context, so Donetsk there, which is again gets heavily shelled every night, Marinka to the south, and then we come around the corner to Vuhledar and Pavlivka. And the railway line here that has been hit, I've told you before, that is sort of quite easily obtainable for the Ukrainians there. There are claims that the Ukrainians are possibly in Pavlivka now. So whether that's true or not is debatable, but it's interesting that they could be pushing back as the Russians have started to take their foot off the gas in that particular area. This could be speculation, but it's coming from, and I won't show you some drone footage of Russians dropping an IED on some Ukrainian troops in Pavlivka, but we don't know exactly when that footage was taken. If it is recent footage, it means that Ukrainians do have a foothold in Pavlivka still, since there's evidence that they're having IEDs dropped on their heads. And this would denounce Russian claims that they fully control Pavlivka and that the AFU has retreated to Vuhledar. The only uncertainty is we don't know when this footage was taken. The situation may have changed. So a little bit of speculation. But even if the Russians do completely control Pavlivka, they are on the place is under some degree of fire control from the Ukrainians anyway. So I'm not sure how useful that is. It's the same as I've said for a long time. And then really, as we go down to Kherson, just not a huge amount of change. There's some fighting going on in Vremivka around here, on this front towards Zaporizhia, but it seems that the Ukrainians are more intent on hitting strategic tactical places behind the lines in this whole region. And there are claims that, as ever, the Ukrainians are amassing forces ready for an attack south. There are also claims that they are amassing forces up in Kharkiv for a further push towards Svatove and towards Starobilsk. So, Russians love to put out these claims, They also make claims that the Ukrainians are getting ready to attack into Russia. So, believe what you want there, I guess. Other places like normal are being hit. Skadovsk seems to be the place that the Ukrainians love to hit, which is down towards here, down towards the coast, southern coast of the Kherson Oblast. Holopristan has been battered over the last sort of 3 or 4 days, but generally exchanges of artillery fire between both sides, and no difference in territory. It seems that maybe it's just recon units working on Kimberley Peninsula, but not a lot of news has come out of there, although there's still an understanding that the Ukrainians are operating to some capacity there. Beware of rumors that they've liberated towns. Don't think that's at all true, but they are probably operating in some capacity. So thank you for hanging out. That's a Frontline update. Not a lot of change apart from the Bakhmut area. Seems to be a little bit of movement for the Russians, and also in Marinka, where they've made some gains there, but it's difficult to know exactly where, so I haven't changed the map. Usual sort of stuff. Anyway, please like, subscribe, share. Thanks for all your support. Really appreciated. And the people who generously donated, and buy me a coffee or PayPal, really appreciate that. Thank you. Always appreciated. Anyway, you take care of yourselves, and I may or may not catch you for a Ukraine update extra video. Depends on how I'm feeling. Toodle pips.